Hello, Erwin. You are up last, sir.
Hey Bart, how's it going?
How's it going, Erwin? Where are you playing out of?
This is going to be played out of MGM Grand Detroit.
MGM Grand Detroit, someplace I have definitely never been to. I have actually never been to Detroit. I believe that our PLO instructor, Ryan Terp himself, plays out of Detroit. I know he plays in Michigan. Do they have PLO games there?
They do. I think they get up to 510 PLO. I'm not a PLO guy, but from what I hear, the PLO action is quite decent in Detroit.
Okay, so speaking of this, actually, too, I don't know if you caught the beginning part of the show. You know, Detroit gets a bad rap, but I was talking to a guy. He was concerned about like cheating in live poker. And I said, really, like if you're going to play full time, you really should concern yourself with not getting robbed. And then when I think of Detroit, like, is your head on a swivel when you leave this place?
Not the casino, but I have definitely played at a couple of very shady home games when everything was shut down. So
yeah, I can imagine. All right, so what's the size of the game you're playing?
Okay, so this is a 510 game.
Okay.
3K max.
Is this the largest hold'em game that goes pretty much?
The largest public game, I know they get a 1025 going. That's like semi-private, but yeah, public, this is the largest.
And how deep are you for this hand?
We're 3K effective.
All right, so 3K effective at 510, 3K cap, largest public game, probably in the city, right? Regular public game in the city. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Yep.
So action starts with the low jack. So it folds to the low jack and he opens to $30.
Okay.
Folds to me in the small blind. I have ace of clubs, king of clubs. I 3-bet to 120.
All right, so straight 4X, okay. You could go a little bit larger than this because you're out of position. No call in between. Obviously, it's a mandatory 3-bet, okay.
Yeah. And yeah, just really quickly, I guess I could go a little bit bigger because we're a bit deeper. Usually it's straddled, but this hand it's not.
Okay. Oh, so it's usually straddled, but for some reason it's not this hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It folds back to the low jack, who 4-bets to 275.
It's funny you should say that. Well, this is not on the live stream. We just had a call where a guy 3-bet out of the small blind against a button open in a 2-blind game. So he 3-bet pocket fives. And, we're talking about how he was always, playing a 3-better fold strategy. Here, this is not a button open. It's a low jack. This is a 9-handed game?
8-handed.
8-handed game. So you're talking about, this is kind of like mid-ish position, right? Like mid-ish position. So, I mean, I don't know how many flats you have in the small blind, if any, but it's a little bit different than a late position open where a lot of people are always playing 3-better fold. I'm just thinking about like him possibly like widening his 4-bet range because of the fact that he might be thinking that you're playing 3-better fold. Hey man, I remember from we used to do this is before all these solvers they were first starting to come out, Top Section podcast. By the way, if you're an elite subscriber on Crush Live Poker, I think you are a CLP website sub, but if you're an elite subscriber, which is the yearly subscription, you get access to the Top Section podcast. There's like a lot of gems in there. I mean, I know it was a podcast, but especially all the stuff with Conlon Ma in it, between like 2016 and like 2020, and then, the hosts that took over after that, there was a lot of gems in there, but I co-hosted that podcast for a long time. And the theory of preflop, where you're always supposed to put the extra bet in, is aces, right? And then ace king suited as a balance. And not even king king is always like put the extra bet in tighter configurations. So, but then you get into situations where, do I have a 5-bet range like in live poker? I mean, I think Mark Goons talked about that. It's hard in situations to have a 5-bet range when you're not really playing all that deep all the time. And then if you've like 5-bet, are you not breaking that 25 to 30% threshold and then folding? I actually have 4-bet ace king suited and folded at the 2-5 game at Encore, but that goes the theory. Now, were you considering 5-betting here?
Okay, so some quick color on Villain here. So he's like, I would say like a good reg in the game. He's definitely aggressive, and he knows I'm aggressive. He knows I would only play 3-better fold out of the small blind.
Okay.
And so I think I haven't played too much with him, but my read is that he's a little bit wide pre-flop. And so I could see him putting in the 4-bet a little bit lighter, knowing that I'm only playing 3-better fold out of the small.
Okay.
So that being said, I did 5-bet here.
Okay.
And like you said, the only hands that I'm ever 5-betting here are aces and ace king suited.
So even if you think that the guy's a little bit light, you wouldn't consider 5-betting king king?
I don't think so. I think I'd let him blast.
So hero 5-bets, and what size do you take here?
Yeah, so I go to 650.
Okay, 650. And I think that one of the other things too, because it's such a rare spot to get into, is talking about like sizing in these spots. You are out of position. That's another thing from top section too. Not necessarily talking about like 5-betting, but 4-betting. You know, when you're a little bit deeper and you're out of position in a cash game, it's not always like 2.2x. Or if you, let's say you're an initial opener from like early position, a guy 3-bets you and you want a 4-bet, that can certainly sometimes be like 3x. Now you went to like, I just didn't want you to make it like 500 or something like that. So it goes 30 to 120, low jack to 275. And now, so then at that point, there's 400 in the pot. So then you're going 650. So it's what, 925 in the pot and like 375 for him to call, it looks like.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if he's got 4-bet bluffs, he should be folding out, right?
Yeah. I decided to go a little bit smaller here because I was thinking even if I had aces, if I think he's 4-betting me a little bit light, like a hand like ace queen suited, ace jack suited, something like that, I'd want to give him a price to continue.
Okay, so he calls?
Yeah, so he does call.
By the way, so if he just like jams it in your face, you're calling off, I assume?
I would probably fold. I think we're deep enough that if I'm going to have aces here, like 60% of the time, I can probably just call with all my aces and still be okay.
And so, because I was talking about the pre-flop threshold, right? I mean, you guys started at 3,000. So you have put in not quite 25% of your stack, right? So you do have enough room. Okay, just interesting. But if you start at 2K, you know, obviously you can't 5-bet fold.
Yeah, I'd get it in for 2K, no problem.
And then the theory goes like, well, if you're breaking the threshold where the guy always knows you're going to call, you're supposed to just jam, as opposed to use a 5-bet sizing. We talk about as a small stakes exploit that you can actually break the threshold with like aces and kings to get these bozos to call anyways. But you 5-bet to 650 and low jack calls?
Yep.
All right. So 1,300 away, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So 1,300 to the flop.
Yep.
The flop comes ace, king, jack, rainbow, with the king of hearts.
So I'm going to put ace of spades, king of hearts, jack of diamonds. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Well, this is another spot where, you know, you don't get into these spots all that much, right? Like a 5-bet pot, what are you supposed to do? I mean, usually like in multi-bets, 4-bet pots, you're supposed to bet a ton of boards kind of with small sizing. I'm just looking at this and thinking in my head, like, how do you balance like checking versus like betting here and things like that? So obviously you're behind a jack. I suppose he could have king, even though there's only one combo of that left, right?
Yeah.
So
I think he could have ace as well.
You think so? Oh, right, because then there's no 6-bet, right? So 3 combos of ace, 1 combo of king, 3 combos of jack. If we don't necessarily know if he's always 4-betting jack here, I mean, there was nobody calling in between.
Right. I think that he might mix, but my read was that I think he would put in the 4th bet with jacks.
And do you think he's going to put the 4th bet in with ace king?
Yeah.
So what, you're down to what, queen, and like maybe like 8s plus or whatever he defends with here?
Yeah, I think something right around there.
So if you were to plug in, just again, I'm going to talk out loud. We don't know this, but if he always 4-bet, well, but he's just calling with jack and he's just calling with ace king. So he still has ace king and jack. Okay. Because he's calling with those when you 5-bet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to think about this spot here. I mean, I suppose you just bet. I mean, you kind of bet small. Could you ever check here? It just seems kind of bizarre when you're representing such top part of your range with like aces, right? Kings and ace king.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, I suppose you go kind of small. I mean, you're not that deep either, right now. I mean, you've got what, 2,300 and change, and the pot's 1,300.
Yeah, something like that.
So, did you ever consider checking?
I did consider checking. Actually, what I ended up doing, I think, is quite similar to checking. I bet 10% pot, so I bet 130. And I had figured that I have this board so locked up that it's going to be hard for villain to continue with a hand even as strong as like pocket queens preflop to like even a like moderate or even small bet. So I was like, let me just go 10% pot here, and that will make his hands like queen queen, for example, indifferent.
So you're going to go super small. And let me ask you this question, though. If you go super small and his response is to call with 100% of range that he continues with, okay, then how do you feel about blank turns if he still has all the strong hands?
I think I would. Basically the way I see it, this board in a 5-bet pot where I'm the aggressor on ace king XX, I have the board so locked up that it's difficult for the villain to put money in with a hand that's worse than ace king, which is top 2. So with my exact hand, my plan was to essentially continue betting small across the run out. I figured it was going to be difficult to get value from a hand worse than ace king if I were to start betting like over a third pot, for example.
I mean, that's certainly viable. I just like I said, I it's such a weird spot, right? Like, is there supposed to be a response from your opponent I mean, usually we talk about when somebody uses like really tiny sizing, there always is a response in or out of position with some frequency of raising. But this is such a unique spot on a unique board. I don't know off the top of my head. All right, so you bet 130.
Yeah. And villain ends up calling here.
Right. I mean, what is he going to fold out? He can't fold queens and tens out, right?
No, I don't think he can fold.
I mean, if he's got king queen suited somehow, I mean, the only thing I suppose he could fold out would be like if he ever arrives here with like 9s or 8s, right?
Yeah. I think even then he's in a really, really tough spot with any hand that doesn't, I guess, like have an ace in it.
Or if he was like getting frisky with like some sort of suited connector that he decided to take to the 5-bet, like 5-6 suited, one of the ones that like interacted.
Right. Yeah. I guess you would have to fold that out.
I guess without a backdoor. It's interesting. All right. So here bets 130 and low jack calls. So 1560, ace of spades, king of hearts, jack of diamonds. And you guys have like 22 and change going to the turn. Okay.
Yep. And the turn is a pretty big brick. It's the 7 of hearts.
So again, I already asked you what your plan was with the break. I mean, it does bring a backdoor heart draw. So you've got the possibility of jack X and ace X of hearts available. You don't really have any straight draws. I mean, 9, 10 suited would be like a gut shot to a queen against 1/10. I guess you have to peel with 9-10 suited with a backdoor. Like that's literally one combo, and you have 22 and change left. So, I mean, what is your definition of small here? Is it like 400 or is it something that's even? So if you go 400 and he calls, probably like 23 and you'll have like 18 left. First of all, I have 2 questions for you. Question number 1, what is your definition of small? Question number 2 is that if you do go small, are you comfortable betting across for value on all 3 streets on a brick runout?
Okay, so first answer, I was thinking small here would be like 25% pot or less.
So that's like 400 or less. Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking that I could probably take this hand, like if I bet 10% on flop, like 20 to 25% on turn, maybe 20% on river, I think I can still somehow get value from worse hands, or just essentially be in a position where I can't really get bluff raised just due to how strong the board is for me. And so on the flop, I was planning to bet the turn, but I sort of, in the moment, made a decision to check. I thought that if he had a hand as strong as aces or kings, by me checking from out of position here, I would figure that out based on if he decided to bet and how big.
The only thing about, well, it's interesting what you state here, because the thing, because this is such a sort of a unique hand, like when you check, are there hands that he starts to bluff with, and what are they? We talked about, like, again, like, we don't know what he defends to a 5-bet, but, like, some of the stuff, like, if he called with some sort of, like, 5-6 suited with a backdoor, I guess that gets started to bluff. Like, 9-10 starts to get some sort of bluff, but, like, he wouldn't bet, like, queen, or does 10-10 start a bluff here?
I don't think I didn't check with really any expectations that he was going to start bluffing. I really think it's difficult to turn a hand into a bluff here, and I don't know if it's right for him to do that either. Like you're saying, I don't think he'll turn like queen into a bluff or something like that. I was more so checking because number one, I think I can check aces here as a trap sometimes, and number two, I do think I would start running out of value with ace king if I decided to take the hand for 3 streets.
Somebody said in the live chat here too, which crossed my mind. I mean, you haven't set it up this way with the small betting, but I was, when I had asked you about if you did bet this turn, right, and he called, like say you had gone 400 and then you called, would you be comfortable like betting across 3 streets? Could you ever get a guy off a chop with ace king?
Yeah, that definitely did cross my mind. And so I had thought that, okay, if I bet super small on flop, super small on turn, super small on river, that might be okay. But I think that still would be pretty thin. I think even if I went like I did 10% pot, if I did like a quarter on turn and a quarter on river, I think the river bet for value is getting pretty thin.
But so you said that your plan was to go 25%, but sort of in the heat of the moment you checked, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And villain checks back.
Well, low jack checks back. I mean, I think at this point, this was to be expected somewhat, and then on a cross of blank, now you're comfortable value betting, right?
Yes.
So yeah. So villain checks back. It remains 1560 again. At 3K effective, low jack to 30, hero 3 bets, ace king of clubs out of the small blind to 120, low jack 4 bets to 275, hero 5 bets to 650 with ace king of clubs, low jack calls 1300. Flop is ace of spades, king of hearts, jack of diamonds, hero bets 130, low jack calls. Turns the 7 of hearts, hero checks, low jack checks back. I am repeating this, by the way, some of you naysayers in the comment, because we make a podcast out of these shows as well. Ace, king, jack, 7 with backdoor hearts. The pot is 1560, and you guys have 22 and change left. Okay, what's the river?
So the river is an offsuit queen.
Queen? I'll put, I guess the suit probably doesn't make any difference, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So the queen, puts a one-liner out there to a 10. And now you're obviously, so the 10 is the nut. There's no flush out there. So you're losing to ace 10, king 10, jack 10. I don't think he ever has queen 10. I had said slivers of like 9-10 suited. Any 10 you're losing to, but I guess you could say more importantly, you're losing to queen now.
Yeah, that was my biggest concern with the river.
But you're beating ace queen.
Yes, I am beating ace queen and ace jack.
I mean, do you just check fold here? I mean, you check and pray?
Okay, so I'll tell you what I did here. I once again bet 10% pot. So I bet 150 here, figuring that a hand like ace queen suited or ace jack suited that somehow made it to the river this way would probably just have to pay it off.
But did you count but I because it's in real time and I'm good at counting combos. I do wonder though, if you sort of properly if you give this range, right, going through the entire hand, pre-flop, a reasonable range, defend to the 5-bet pre-flop on the flop, aren't you losing to more hands though than you're beating here?
I think it's pretty close. I think he should have quite a bit of ace king represented. I think he also would be a little bit wider because my 5-bet pre-flop was definitely on the smaller side. And like I said, I think he could 4-bet me pretty light and call with some of those hands. I think like checking is totally fine here. And I think me blocking for roughly 10% pot is roughly the same as, I guess, checking.
Well,
from my perspective.
I mean, the whole thing with a block bet, I've discussed this many times, that a block bet has to be called by worse for it to be a play. it certainly can get called by worse. And then I suppose my issues with block bets are that if you're ever in a situation where it prevents your opponent from bluffing, it's stupid to block. But this hand is so special, I don't even think that that's necessarily like a consideration, like as played. Like what hand is going to start to bluff here that didn't start to bluff turn unless he was going to turn something into a bluff at the end. Like if you had checked at the end here and the hero had queen jack or the hero had king queen, I would think that those might be candidates for your opponent. Excuse me, if your opponent had queen jack or your opponent had king queen, I would think that those might be candidates for your opponent to turn into a bluff. Now, I suppose he beats like ace 5, but again, you'd have to really, really get into the weeds of combinatorics. The other thing too that you always have sometimes happen here is that like if you block, sometimes a response is to get it shoved in your face. And I don't know what you thought about that, like what your plan was.
Yeah, so I thought if he raised all in, I could just fold, because I could definitely see myself playing pocket aces in the same way. I think there are a bunch of sets represented on the river here with especially queen queen coming in. You can have jack jack, where if I bet super small, you'll probably still raise those sets. And if I had ace ace, I could go ahead and 3-bet all in for value. But yeah, on this river, I think the 150 block bet, it is a little bit thin. I don't know exactly. I didn't calculate in real time if there were more combos that I was beating than were beating me.
Let me throw something else out at you too. Again, sort of thinking out loud, is that if you get jammed on here and it is true that your opponent is supposed to be like, or you think your opponent's going to be like turning some 2-pair types of holdings into a bluff here, like would I be more comfortable folding queen queen or jack jack as opposed to ace king? The reason why I say I'm more comfortable folding if I got here with like jack jack or queen queen is because if you had queen queen or jack jack, now you're blocking the hands that want to turn them into bluffs. Here with ace king, you're not as much. Like I said, it's such a kind of a crazy situation, but personally, I probably wouldn't have blocked here for 150. I understand you're thinking, all right, so you bet 150.
Yeah, so I bet 150 here, and this is where the hand starts to get pretty interesting. He now raises to 500.
Okay.
So he raises to 500, and in real time, I was thinking that the hands that he would be most likely to have here would be queen, queen, and jack, jack. I guess ace, ace, and king, king are still possible, but less likely due to the fact that, number one, I'm blocking those hands, and number two, I figured that he would bet ace, ace, and king, king on the turn at least some percentage of the time.
So wait a minute. I think I kind of know where you're going here. So you're saying that you think he might be making a thin value raise here with queen, queen, not scared of you having ace, ace, or king, king because you check the turn?
Yes.
And you're going to try to get him. So are you going to try to get him off of that?
Yeah, so I did raise all in, trying to represent pretty much ace, ace.
Ace, ace?
Yeah.
Are you raising all in with ace, ace at the end? We're going to one-liner out here to a 10, right? You bet 1/10 the size of the pot on the flop.
Yeah, I didn't think there was going to be that much 10x represented in the 5-bet pot. I think he could have slivers, but on a board of ace, king, queen, jack in a 5-bet pot with aces, I think like all the other sets would be represented. So I would feel comfortable taking ace, ace for an all-in sizing on the river.
Well, maybe that's what it comes down to. Again, it's hard to say. So you're saying that there's just not that much 10x because of preflop. Whether it's ace 10, jack 10 suited, queen 10, or 10-10?
Yeah.
I suppose, but man, you're really, really like, I mean, you're trying to give your opponent a lot of credit. let me just say this is that like I've watched a lot of live stream, like probably thousands and thousands of hours. I've commentated on live stream right back at Live the Bike, many years. Obviously, that's a little bit older school now. Many long nights on Hustler Casino Live, plus analyzed many live streams for CLP videos. I've never seen a play like this ever in my life.
Yeah, I figured that I had a decent chance of getting it through just because like who would be like bluffing in this spot, I guess. And so I did end up going for it. And villain tanks for several minutes and is just very confused. And in the end he does fold.
And did you ever get a reveal?
I did not.
You never talked to him? You didn't try to, I mean, you didn't try to find, listen, I'm not one for trying to like ask people like what they have. But if I were to make a once in a career type of play, I might, is this guy a regular? Like, do you play with him?
Yeah, he's a regular. I was figuring I'd just ask him like the next week or something. Maybe he'd be more likely to tell me, but I didn't want to ask like after having won the hand.
Well, maybe he'll watch this one.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe he'll watch this one. That is that's crazy. I mean, I actually the river play is, I don't even know if I can have enough like brain cells to comment on this. I guess I would never play it this way. I actually think that the earlier streets are kind of interesting because of the very extreme nature of the ranges in a 5-bet pot. We don't get to see 5-bet pots that much on this type of board in live poker. I mean, how often are you even in a 5-bet pot in live poker?
Yeah, not very often.
I mean, I don't know how much you play, but if you're playing say like 20 hours a week, how often are you in a 5-bet pot where there are multiple streets of stacked up to play? Once a year?
Yeah, it's very infrequent. I can't. It's probably I play quite a bit, and it's been a while since I've played a 5-bet pot.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the call, Erwin. I appreciate it. Anyways, my head's about to explode.